que ahora les vamos a presentar a otra persona que es un empresario también, es de Nueva York también, joven, se llama Henry Gordon Smith y él es de Blue Planet Consulting. Démosle la bienvenida.
Yeah? No? Or fix it? Yeah? I think I have to hold it higher. Sorry, guys. Is that better? Do I have to go like this the whole time? Hi, I'm Henry Gordon Smith. Nice to meet you. I'm visiting from New York City. I'm an urban agriculture consultant, and I'm here to share a little bit about my story and my passion for urban agriculture, because I believe that urban agriculture can hold the key to sustainable development, even though it's kind of this crazy, chaotic thing that often happens. So, you know, my story goes a little bit starting from social media, actually. I'm not a farmer, and I'm hoping that the story inspires some of you young people to get involved. I started with a social media background, and then I started a blog called Agritecture, which became quite popular as urban agriculture and vertical farming picked up. And that kind of got me some opportunities to volunteer at some greenhouses, and over time I learned how to kind of take on this challenge of growing food in our cities and combating food security. So urban agriculture is crazy. You know, you take these unused spaces in cities, empty blocks, empty spaces around the city, rooftops, basements, and you try to grow food in them, and food is very difficult to grow. And I think there's a beautiful chaos in urban agriculture. This is Edenworks, a company in Brooklyn, New York, and you know, they converted a rooftop into a passive greenhouse. They built it on their own. They built through the winter. They drove around picking up supplies, and they kind of have evolved into growing this incredibly flavorful product that the chefs in New York City love. In Chicago, there's a group called The Plant that converted an unused warehouse into a circular economy model where they use mushrooms to generate carbon for the plants, and they have this whole community of entrepreneurs that work together to make urban agriculture reality. But again, their mission is a circular economy, so all the resources are shared within the structure. And it's amazing that you can take these unused spaces, throw in this chaos, and come with these amazing solutions that can be solutions to sustainable development. In Berlin, Germany, we've got Infarm. They started with a small product that was growing microgreens and then evolved into consulting on setting up some of these farms and doing a really high-tech software for indoor agriculture. This final picture here is at Metro, which is one of the largest supermarkets in the world, supermarket chains in the world, and they've actually built a vertical farm inside the supermarket, which is a new stage of shifting consumer awareness. And I think it's this chaos that these young entrepreneurs take on that is really exciting, because it's such a challenge at the beginning, but along the way, you learn incredible, incredible things. This is a project that our company, Blue Planet Consulting, did for a school in Sarasota, Florida. And you know, I want to talk a little bit about what we learned through this process. So they wanted to grow all of their lettuce for the school. The school had a goal to hit 50% local produce. And surprisingly, in Florida, they actually buy a lot of their lettuce from California, especially the schools, which is crazy because there's great weather there. But the soil is very sandy, so they can't actually grow a lot of crops in the sand. And so they have to actually import a lot from California. So we decided to set up a hydroponic greenhouse, and through the process we learned about the site, we learned about some of the water issues there, and we learned about how the students might engage in this. For the first time, we were actually looking at the numbers that the school was consuming and how much they were importing from California. And it's through taking on these unusual challenges that we learn and really start to discover the problems in our existing food system and how to tackle them. So let's talk about urban agriculture a little bit more. So we've got resources that we depend on to set up these farms. We need energy to power them if they're vertical, if they require artificial lights. We've got water, biomass, and raw materials. And these are kind of the core resources that make up our cities and make up our existence. And so by trying to force all of that into a farming operation in small spaces and cities, it's my belief that we really discover some interesting things. There's some challenges we're dealing with, like zoning, policies, distribution, how food goes through the city, competition, how are you going to compete with cheap food coming from California or other places with really heavy agriculture, and then the design challenges that you have to overcome to make these systems fit, to make these farms fit. And I think through that process, we really learn exciting things. We learn about our local food movement, we learn about how to combat resiliency, and we learn about urban renewal. Also, there's a lot of lack of skills for agriculture in the city. So in the process, we begin to discover that a lot of our young people in cities have lost their connection with agriculture entirely. And these urban farms provide a mechanism to relearn that. And they don't just learn about how to farm, they learn how to build, they learn how to do electrical, they learn how to do plumbing, they learn how to manage systems, they learn how to market, and they learn how to grow food and understand where their food comes from. So let's back up a little bit and talk about the spectrum of urban agriculture. So there's many different types of urban farms. On the low-tech end, you have kind of these community-based, open, and exposed to the environment farms. Battery Park is an urban farm just on the south, just downtown Manhattan. Brooklyn Grange is the largest rooftop farm in the world, and it's a soil-based farm. Now that's very exciting as well because they're commercial and they're growing a lot of food, but some of the downsides with soil-based agriculture is that you can't grow all year round. You're susceptible to the weather. When Hurricane Sandy came in, a lot of the soil-based urban farms were damaged. So Brooklyn Grange has to kind of supplement some of its revenue with events, with weddings, with yoga classes, which are very, very nice, by the way. But it's not necessarily just focused on growing food. Harlem Grown is a hybrid model. It's a community farm that has soil-based and hydroponic greenhouse. It's really cool to see because they have about a 1,500 square foot greenhouse in the middle of 3 buildings with very little light, and they're growing about 9,000 plants in there and just giving it away to the community and selling some of it to some premium restaurants. Sky Vegetables is a bit more on the commercial side again, rooftop, hydroponic, 8,500 square feet, growing leafy greens, and that's a model that was integrated with the affordable housing building there. And we learned some interesting things about how you can share energy with the buildings and the greenhouse itself, meaning capturing heat and moving it up into the greenhouse. Edenworks is now developing, since their rooftop, now they're developing an indoor stacked vertical farm, which is very much on that high-tech side. So the point here is that we're responsible when we're looking at the city and developing urban agriculture to look at the whole spectrum. It's our responsibility to be holistic and to consider that, not just stick with one or what we know is best, or we think is best, rather. And what's really interesting is that there's so many different things that can be learned and applied along this spectrum. So when you're thinking about starting your urban farm, think about what kind you're going to start and why. Are you trying to contribute to biodiversity? Are you trying to grow as much food as possible? Are you trying to create jobs? Are you trying to educate? Because all of these goals will define how you actually implement your farm and what systems you use. So let's go back to cities, the importance of buildings in cities. So we spend 90% of our time indoors in buildings. So they really represent the typology that can teach us the most. And that's why I like integrating food into buildings the most. More than 50% of our population now live in cities. We see that rise, that trend continuing to rise. And buildings consume over 40% of our energy. So what if we began to look at buildings like this building, instead of consumers of energy and water and producers of waste, what if we saw them as producers of product? We were starting to do that with water capture and with renewable energy, with solar panels, but we need to start doing that with food. That's the next frontier, is bringing food back into our cities and back into our buildings. And at the beginning, it's crazy. It's really, really difficult to do. The economics are tough. The technology is difficult. But again, it's my philosophy that we learn some things through the process of attempting that very courageous, very bold vision. And we'll get into that a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, sustainable development is economic development without depletion of natural resources. This is a very, very, very difficult challenge to take on. It's about a balance between the built and natural systems. And so when we're all moving to cities, we have to start learning how we can integrate agriculture into those spaces. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to achieve that sustainable development goal. So how do we do this? Well, my way of doing it was about 6 years ago, I started a concept of agritecture, just merging architecture and agriculture. And I created this blog to inspire people through my favorite concepts and through the business and news that was coming out about people starting these farms and being successful. So, agri is farm and texture is building. So I thought, this is great. This is going to bring both of those things together. So I want you to think about what's your stake? How can you contribute to this rise and this need to combat food security? What's your angle? And we're going to talk a little about how you can get into that. So the roadblocks to sustainable development are economic viability. It's very difficult to make the case for green technologies most of the time. And it's very hard to compete with existing infrastructure, especially in agriculture, that produces a cheap product, an inexpensive product. Education and skills. So we have a deficit of growers. We've seen a consistent decline over the past 30 years in the United States of young growers. The farmers are getting older, the farms are getting bigger, and young people are moving to the city for opportunities. How are we going to develop our cities sustainably if we don't even understand how to grow our own food? That's a problem. Backward policies. So we're existing in an infrastructure of policies that are locked in and prevent us from developing a lot of innovation. Limited technology. We still need to invest a lot in developing the right technologies to grow more food in less space. Optimism. I think sometimes we go back and forth. The world is very challenging, and climate change is a very scary thing. But we need to continue to focus, just like this event is doing, on optimism, that we, through our passion, through our courage and our hard work, can really change the world and develop cities into the more sustainable ones that they should be. And then the demand. You know, we need to tell our friends and our families, and when we go to the store, we need to vote with our dollars, right? What are you buying? Are you buying that vegan, raw product that's going to contribute to your health that was just talked about? Are you buying something that's local, something that's sustainable? Or are you just finding the cheapest product? It's incredibly powerful if all of us in this room started thinking about that when we purchase the product. Not just how is it going to taste, but what is the impact of that product on labor, on the environment, on society? We need to drive that demand. So these are some of the things that urban agriculture has taught me. This is, at Columbia University, I studied sustainability management, and this was my final project, which was a concept vertical farming complex with some greenhouse, some vertical farms, some kind of outdoor space. And you know, it was designed to feed 5,000 people a full vegetarian diet every day. And I really wanted to tackle some of the challenges of what kind of zoning is going to be amicable for these farms. And that's what I learned through the process. I learned what kind of green jobs really are needed to power these farms. I learned what policies make this development difficult. I mean, there was no definition of vertical farms or what zoning would be right for it. So I learned that that was something that was missing, and I could focus on tackling that. What technologies work, which ones don't. So looking at the data, what do we know, what don't we know? What green products will consumers buy? I went around the neighborhood and asked people, you know, what kind of crops, what kind of vegetables would you eat? How can I make this crazy idea economically viable? One of the solutions I found was in New York City, there's a huge problem with green infrastructure, with spaces that manage rainwater events. Basically, the system will flood whenever there's more than an inch of rain, and sewage and water will combine and go into the river. It's a big problem. And the city's investing a lot in that. So I found that actually by creating all of this green space around the farms, I could actually fund the kind of expensive, the high capital of the project itself. And what incentives exist for my projects? These are the things we learn when we tackle urban agriculture. So now about the people. What's so exciting is that there's a movement across the world where young people are getting involved in this industry and are taking on the chaos of urban agriculture, because it really is chaos. So Christopher Washington studied history, then he went in the Peace Corps for a little while, then he volunteered at some aquaponic facilities in Africa. There's so many other stories like this, some of them that didn't require 3 years of study. You can do it in a shorter time, 6 months, 12 months, you can learn a lot. And now he manages his own greenhouse farms. And the problem that Christopher Washington is trying to solve, again, is that product from California. He believes that we deserve to buy a living product when we go to the supermarket, a product that still has the roots on, that's still kind of growing, so it's as fresh as it can be when you get it as the consumer. And I think that's noble, because he's combating food miles, and I think he's re-educating the consumer. So the path to sustainable urban development in its simplest form is recognizing the problem. What is the problem that you are most passionate about, that you want to solve? And then, just like our previous speaker, starting a business around that idea and solving that. If that's a problem, then you can probably make money off solving it. And that's what I think is so exciting about social entrepreneurship. There's so many problems in the world, and whether it's solving a better wheel or a better watch, okay, that's fine. But if you want to solve an environmental or social problem, that's very exciting, and it's very fulfilling work. And so you can think about that and find the business angle to make money whilst solving a problem. Then we need to disrupt this linear economy. So whatever solution you come up with shouldn't really fit within the standard modes of operation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the linear economy in the next slide, but basically that's a linear resource flow that we have. So that product's being grown, again, in California, shipped to a distribution center, put into a retail store, consumer buys it, goes home, then there's waste. I put that waste into the trash, that goes maybe to Ohio. So that's just a linear flow. A circular economy is going to try and capture that waste and create a resource out of it. As my friend likes to say, waste, formerly known as a resource, or formerly known as a resource, formerly known as waste. Excuse me. So then we need to drive the circular economy. So here you go. This is what we have right now. We extract resources, we produce, we distribute, we consume, and then we waste. It's very unsustainable, and it's not going to solve our problems. So we need to focus on a circular economy where we reuse those. And the plant in Chicago is a good example of that. But that whole challenge is very difficult. It's very chaotic. But I think while I've been working on urban farms, I've been learning so much more about water, how to maintain water, how to save water, how to reuse it. I've been learning about biomass. How long does it last? You know, what's needed from an energy perspective to get that plant to grow? And I think that urban agriculture, because of its pursuit, can really change the awareness of young people and older people to learn about the challenges that we're facing and how to take on and tackle the circular economy. We're actually the Association of Vertical Farming, which is a global nonprofit to encourage vertical farming technologies and collaboration, is having a summit in Amsterdam where the theme is vertical farming and the circular economy. We're going to have some great speakers from around the world, something worth considering. So how do you get involved? I'm going to teach you the basic ways to get started, the tips I give to all the young people and older people on how do I get involved. I get a lot of questions. How can I move my career into vertical farming and urban agriculture? And these are the 3+1 simple steps. The first one is build your archive. There's a real lack of data and access to that data in the agriculture world. Yields are difficult to calculate. Wastage is difficult to calculate. You know, you've got, I'm going to store that product for a little while. I'm going to transport it. It's very, very difficult. And there's so many different kinds of plants that we can grow. So you need to start taking on that knowledge by building your own archive, by building your own data archive. It can be as simple as a Google Drive. There's some other cool softwares out there. But anything you learn at this event, you should be capturing that and storing it somewhere because it becomes part of your assets, your capacity to build your career. And you can answer questions on the spot or draw them up from your archive. And Alison Kopf is going to talk a little bit about why we need so much data in relationship to agriculture later on today. Build your network. So these events are great, but there's lots of other ways you can do it too. Building your network isn't just about making contacts and trading cards. It's about patting each other on the back. It's about giving favors and asking for favors in return. If you're not giving your network something, then you can't expect something in return. Also, if you're looking for a job, it's really important that you tell your network that you're looking for a job. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to watch out for those opportunities when maybe they're at an event and you're not there, and they think, oh, wow, that's going to be a great opportunity for Henry. I know he's looking for a job. I'm going to connect these two people. And you should be connecting your network with other people as well. It's so powerful. For me, it really built my career up. It's how I was able to be successful and make it in New York. Then you need the hands-on experience. So, 6 years, I started with blogging, I started with reporting about this. I pretty much knew every farm that was growing food in the city. I had my archive growing and my network was slowly coming along. But I applied for jobs and I wasn't taken seriously because I had never grown a plant from seed to harvest. And, who can blame me? I grew up in Hong Kong and Tokyo until I was 10. I couldn't be further detached from agriculture. But it's so important that you learn that. It's so important that you take that on, whether it's at home, but ideally in a commercial setting. And then when you go to those interviews, you're going to be taken seriously. They're going to see that, okay, this person gets it. They're not a farmer, but they're going to contribute, and they're going to understand what the farmers are going through. Because in the agricultural world, we have a huge respect for our growers. They deal with challenges that are very difficult for any person to deal with. They deal with difficult hours, and they have to handle growing these plants to feed all of us. And so if you can't kind of connect with the farmers and say, oh, I know what that's like, or this is the experience I had growing my plants, then you're really going to have a difficult time garnering respect. The last part is to build your personal brand. That goes back to your original idea. What is the problem you're going to solve? And don't stop pushing that message forward, okay? My problem that I'm going to solve is urban agriculture and making it economically viable and finding the business models to make that possible. And I'm going to promote that subject wherever possible because I believe that by achieving urban agriculture, by figuring it out, we learn so much along the way that's going to help sustainable development overall. So you should use your brand and personal branding, your personal fingerprint, to push forward your message as you spread it around the world and build your career. Thank you so much for your time. I really invite you to check out Blue Planet Consulting and Agritecture, and really don't give up trying to solve the food security problem.